Okay, Amy Nichols is... Sorry, got that right. Amy Nicholas, Fish and Wildlife Biologist, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. And do you want to hold this or?
I would like to hold that. I like microphones. So I am totally going to switch gears here right now. So I'm going to be talking about policy. And normally policy, I'm a scientist, normally policy, even though I work for the government, bores me to tears. This is actually really exciting. And the timing of this meeting, and I thank the Whitebark Pine Foundation for allowing me to come and speak about this, the timing of this is perfect because I'm going to be doing a massive undertaking for Whitebark Pine starting in October. So I'm going to be talking today about this new process that the service is undertaking to address species that we have determined are warranted for listing. So of course Whitebark Pine falls into that category. So because of time constraints, I'm just going to present this at the 30,000 foot level. So really brief, and then at the end of this meeting I'm going to beg for data from you people. So just to get everybody on board, most of you probably are already aware of this, but these are the previous federal actions that we've had in the U.S. So Whitebark Pine was first initially petitioned in 1991, so this has been going on for 20 years. So we said in 1991 there wasn't enough information for us to determine that the species should be warranted for listing. We got petitioned again in 2008. And in 2010, we did a 90-day finding. We said, yes, there is enough information in that petition, and we should move ahead with Whitebark Pine. So in 2011, I was the lead for the 12-month finding for Whitebark Pine, where we determined that it was warranted for listing, but that listing was precluded by other higher priority species. In 2015, we do a candidate notice of review every year. 2015, we changed the listing priority number from a really high priority to a lower priority. And I know particularly some people in this room, nobody agreed with that decision, but it really was just an acknowledgement of the decline of the beetle epidemic. It in no way said that we don't think this species is still warranted for listing. So in 2016, we did another CNOR, and nothing's going to change. But in 2017, there's going to be a major change. So here's the update. We have a national listing plan that we just put out on the web, and I've put the web page down there for you all if you want to look at it. We're going to have to deal with almost over 400 species, and Whitebark Pine is one of them. We are going to do a proposed listing determination for this species. It's going to be done by fiscal year 2019. So at that time in 2019, we're either going to say the species should be listed as either threatened or endangered, and we may designate critical habitat at that same time, or we're going to provide a notice of not warranted finding, and we're going to remove it as a candidate entirely. So those are the two options going to happen in 2019. So just to get everyone on board again with the listing process, so normally, and we're still going to do this, but we would have a 12-month finding, and it's a 5-factor analysis. And those 5 factors, this is required under the Endangered Species Act, those 5 factors. It's very threat-based. So you've got factor A, you've got habitat degradation, factor B is overutilization for scientific purposes or religious purposes or whatever reason. Factor C is disease and predation, which of course is a huge thing with Whitebark Pine. Factor D is inadequacy of regulatory mechanisms, and we've got factor E, which is kind of a catch-all. So any other man-made issues that are impacting the species. So this 5-factor analysis is a decision document, and it's published in the Federal Register. So we're still going to do that, but we have come up with this new process, and we're hoping that this is going to make listing a lot more transparent to everybody. So it's a species status assessment. Again, an analytical approach. It's more focused on the species. So I'm going to do this before any decision documents are made. It's a central document, so it's universal. We're going to use it for every listing action, every activity that we do under the endangered. Characterizes viability. So what drives viability, up or down? Again, this is at the 30-foot level, and we have a lot of information of how we're going to determine what drives viability. We're still going to consider threats, absolutely, but they're going to be considered relative to viability. I'm beginning this next month, so this is going to be a massive undertaking for whitebark pine because this is a range-wide listing, and as you know, the range is huge. So the great thing about the SSA, and we're going to be doing this for all our species in the future that we get petitioned for, it's scalable, it's adaptable. So you've got some level of complexity, and that's going to be determined by your data availability, the availability of expertise, which thank you to everyone in this room because I think we got a lot for whitebark pine. The species range and the complexity of the ecology, which, as you know, for whitebark pine is pretty high. So all of that comes into the level of complexity for the species. It determines the amount of expertise we're going to be asking for to help us with this. I'm going to be putting together teams for this. That determines the level of complexity is the team size and also the time required to complete this. So that's why we have for whitebark pine 2019 deadline. I was allowed, after many considerations and talking with my regional office, this is going to be a big undertaking. This is going to be complex. And so they gave me 30 months to do it, thankfully. So the SSA approach, and I always love that cartoon over there because I think people really considered this with listing. They were like point A to point C, and whatever happened in B, nobody knew. So again, with the SSA, it's not going to be a decision document. It's all about the science. So it's just going to be science, ecology, biology. It's going to be consistent between species. It's collaborative. It's going to be legally defensible. That's the whole. And it's going to be transparent. So anything we do, we're going to make it really clear the steps that we took to get there. And the findings, so the 12-month finding that we're still going to do, the one in 2012, it's going to be based entirely on this SSA. So this document's incredibly important to the species. So again, it's going to inform all ESA decisions. So the SSA is in the middle. It's going to be what we know about whitebark pine. So whether we're doing a listing, which is the case here, or if we do list and we decide to do a recovery plan, or delist it, or do candidate assessments, or all the things that go along with the ESA, it's all going to come from this one central document. Here's the great thing about this, because if you've ever been involved in listing, here's how we normally did. This flips the pyramid. So I would get petitioned, and I've worked with a lot of species, get petitioned, do a data call, gather all that data, put it into a 5-factor analysis. I would make recommendations, and then there'd be this huge amount of document prep, and it wasn't really clear when the determination was made. People would be making comments, whatnot, and so on. And then at that point, a lot of people haven't even seen the document, so there'd be a huge amount of review and rewrites and editing, and it seems like we spent all our time on that. So we wanted to reverse that, and that's what this SSA process is about. So with the SSA, it might be the front end of what we're doing is going to be a lot more time, so it's going to be about the science. So I am loving this process. The decision's going to be at a set point. Everybody's going to have seen the document. There's going to be a lot of collaboration with stakeholders. And then the review and surname process is going to be really short. So the SSA itself, we're really looking at, again, species needs. So we've always done this with the taxonomy, life history, all that kind of stuff. That was always involved in the 12-month finding, but it was really small a part of the finding. This is going to be much more in-depth, much more explicit. We're going to look at ecological needs, and we're going to start all the way from the bottom at the individual level. You know, what does it take for one tree to persist on the landscape? We're going to wrap that up to a population level. And you can imagine as you go up through these levels, it's going to get a lot more complex. We were talking about this at the working group meeting yesterday, you know, what is even a population, and what's more important, a big dense stand or some trees scattered out on the landscape somewhere else? That's all going to have to be defined, and how that's defined is we're going to have to be really explicit about that. But it's going to be very complex, and then we're going to wrap that all up to the species level and talk about viability. All of this gets presented to the decision makers. It's only a biological document. So again, we're going to describe the species needs. We're going to describe the current condition of the species. And then we're also going to, of course, talk about future, and climate change has come up a lot today, and that's going to be a big part of all of this. And again, this is not a regulatory interpretation of the data. It's entirely a biological document. So collaboration, we're going to talk to experts. Now, we're going to engage experts and stakeholders, and we're not going to ask, especially for people in agencies, you don't have to represent any kind of position or provide a group consensus. We're not going to ask people to vote, but you're going to participate. We're going to ask the experts to participate by sharing their information to make us understand, get the story clear about the ecology of whitebark pine. So again, we're trying to get this to be a transparent and explicit analysis solely based on the best available science. This is going to happen before any policy or decisions are applied. Again, future is going to be big for whitebark pine particularly. So we're going to have to come up with some scenarios, some scenarios to present to the decision makers. These are the things that could happen. They're going to have to determine what their risk is. What risk is acceptable to them? So we're going to have to say possible futures, probable futures, preferable futures. And we're going to look at all kinds of different components. Of course, the stressors, so the threats get involved in all of this. Of course, climate change. But we also need to really look at conservation efforts. Because if there's conservation efforts that are on the ground, that they're proven, there's some kind of commitment made by agencies or other people that this is actually going to happen, it could actually preclude listings. So we're going to wrap that all into this one document and look at what we think the species response to all these things are going to be. And then this was just a little chart showing what we would think about the potential future conditions. Green obviously is what we'd like. We'd like to turn that trend from a downward trend to an upward trend. Or then the red line is just status quo. If we did nothing, it's going to keep going down, obviously, with whitebark pine. And then we got to come up with some scenarios like worst case scenario, like if X, Y, and Z happen, it could be even worse. So we're going to look at all of that. So again, the species status assessment is going to be the universal document. We need to tell the story of whitebark pine to the decision makers, some of whom may or may not have any science background at all. I'm going to do, and we've done this in the past for other species we've worked with, so there will be a formal data call sent out, and I'm going to ask everybody in this room to send me something. But there's also an a more informal component to this. So if you've got data, or if you want to tell a story, or you have some piece of information that you think is critical for our understanding of this species, send it to me. You don't have to wait for the formal data call. Also, there's going to be a lot of collaboration on this. So in the past, you'd send me data, I go and do whatever I do, and then you never see it again until it gets published. This is not going to be the case for this. So there's a much bigger opportunity for expert participation. So the path forward, and this is where the expert participation comes in, I'm going to be putting together a project plan in the next 2 months. It's going to be very detailed schedule of every step that we're going to take in the next 30 months to get to our determination. I'm going to put together a team. A lot of it will be an internal team, so a lot of Fish and Wildlife Service folks that are throughout the range. But I also would like, I'm able to, under this SSA framework, to ask some experts to actually be involved in this. And that level of involvement can take a number of different forms depending on people's availability or willingness to participate. So it could go all the way from writing something or just down to reviewing documents in your area of expertise. So I'm going to be doing outreach to experts and stakeholders. So everybody a lot of the people in this room, I will be contacting you. But at the same time, please contact us. And I wanted to introduce Jim Lindstrom, who's over there. If you could stand up, Jim. So Jim is my GIS guru, cartographer, specialist. And obviously there's going to be a huge spatial component to anything that we're doing. So either one of us, please feel free to contact us if you have information. Like I said, I will be sending out a formal data call shortly. That's it.